Welcome to But Frankly Pierce News. I'm Arthur Fairview. Here's what we're facing. What would you do if you found a strange anonymous package on your porch?
Is it ticking?
No.
Is there any involuntary movement?
Maybe. A former eBay executive was sentenced last week to almost 5 years in prison for leading a scheme to terrorize the creators of an online newsletter, including sending live spiders, cockroaches, a funeral wreath, and other disturbing deliveries to their home. Ina and David Steiner published an online newsletter called E-Commerce Bites. The Steiners were the targets of a harassment campaign that, they stated in court, eBay former Senior Director of Safety and Security James Baugh and other eBay employees made their lives a living hell. They expressed fear that other companies would use it as a blueprint to go after journalists in the future.
What did they do?
A scheme was hatched in August 2019 after Ina Steiner wrote a story about a lawsuit brought by eBay accusing Amazon of poaching its sellers. A half hour after the article was published, then CEO Devin Wenig sent another top eBay executive a message saying, "If you are ever going to take her down, now is the time," according to court documents. That executive sent Wenig's message to Baugh and called Ina Steiner a biased troll who needs to get burned down.
We have found the witch, may we burn her? Burn her!
Soon, Ina Steiner began receiving harassing and sometimes threatening Twitter messages. Bizarre, anonymous packages started arriving at the couple's home, including a box of live spiders, a funeral wreath, and a book about surviving the loss of a spouse. Ina Steiner began receiving dozens of strange emails from groups like Irritable Bowel Syndrome Patient Support Group and the Communist Party of the United States, authorities say.
Miguel Figueroa of the Communist Party of Canada says he's going to abolish capitalism and create a perfect society. But what he doesn't tell you is he's doing it with a Soviet-style approach rather than a Marxist interpretation of historical dialectic. That's just crazy. On January 23rd, vote for the Marxist-Leninists. Bet you didn't know Canada had two communist parties. The Marxist-Leninist Party of Canada, splitting the Lost Cause vote.
That was Canada, not the United States.
Oops, my bad.
Authorities portrayed Baugh as the mastermind of the scheme and said he directed eBay employees to use prepaid debit cards, disguises, and overseas email accounts to hide the company's involvement.
Ugh, what's next?
Well, current failing Russian President Vladimir Putin announced the formal annexation of 4 territories in Ukraine last Friday, with a referendum that violates international law and the UN Charter.
Didn't Russia just abandon some of those territories?
Seems odd that they can't hold what they tried to take by force.
U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken called these sham referendums and a complete farce.
He's not wrong.
True, Putin is a complete farce.
Back here in the U.S., it is said that desperate times breed creativity.
Yes, I've heard that.
But this is not the kind you had in mind, I'm sure.
Oh?
Oh. While Florida residents and emergency crews survey the devastation from Hurricane Ian, 2 former far-right congressional candidates have floated a baseless conspiracy theory that the federal government created the storm to punish and target Republicans. Lauren Witzke, a QAnon-supporting conspiracy theorist who was the GOP candidate for U.S. Senate seat in Delaware in 2020, said she has no doubt that technology exists to manipulate the weather, and that it could be used to target Florida Governor Ron DeSantis.
Now is the winter of your discontent. The weather is no longer in God's hands, but in mine. Hundreds of millions will die. They'll drown, burn, freeze. And this is merely the beginning.
We know the technology does exist, she told former GOP congressional candidate Deanna Lorraine on her far-right conspiracy theory streaming channel, above a caption reading, "Biden builds transhuman cyborg army using immigrants." Witzke continued by saying, she is not putting it past the elites to target something like this towards Florida as punishment for eliminating COVID-19 vaccine requirements and getting rid of child grooming, referencing the state's law prohibiting classroom discussion of LGBT+ people and issues by smearing its critics as groomers. Lorraine then added her 2 cents.
We understand that the deep state, they have weather manipulation technology. They have DARPA. They know how to manipulate and create big storms, hurricanes, tornadoes, climate change, etc. And these huge hurricanes always seem to target red states, red districts, and always at a convenient time, typically right before elections. Or, in this case, possibly because Ron DeSantis has been stepping out of line a lot and fighting the deep state.
Miss Lorraine, by the way, received less than 2% of the vote in a race against House Speaker Nancy Pelosi in 2020.
That means someone was literally actually dumb enough to vote for her.
Who is this person?
I can't work with this.
You deal with it.
Next. Is it possible that the failed former president is finally starting to lose his grip?
In addition to his mind?
Surrounded by lawsuits and litigation, his staying power seems to be waning.
And there was much rejoicing.
The failed former president spoke in Warren, Michigan, to support several candidates that he has endorsed in the upcoming midterm elections. Most prominent among these candidates is Tudor Dixon, the Republican nominee challenging incumbent Democrat Governor Gretchen Whitmer. Now, despite the occasion, several tweets from Detroit Free Press reporter Paul Egan seem to suggest that the event did not draw a capacity crowd, and that Trump's speech at the rally may have driven some attendees away. In his initial tweet, Egan included a photo of an area at the back of the venue, despite it being only 10 minutes until Trump was due to speak. Egan tweeted, "This was the rear of the Macomb College Sports and Expo Center, 10 minutes before former President Trump began speaking. There appeared to be still ample standing room. Fire marshal said capacity was 6,600. Later in the night, Egan said that around 15 minutes into Trump's speech, attendees appeared to be steadily leaving. The failed former president reportedly spoke briefly about his endorsed candidates before moving on to familiar grievances. His speech ultimately ended up lasting an hour.
I didn't think there was a level of bile and stench those MAGA people couldn't handle.
That he's reached an even lower low.
You will never find a more wretched hive of scum and villainy.
Moving to sports.
When did we start covering sports?
Let him go. He's on a roll.
Yesterday, New York Yankees outfielder Aaron Judge hit his 62nd home run this season, passing the record set 61 years ago by Roger Maris, making Judge the American League single-season home run king. For those that missed it, let's take a look.
High fly ball, deep left. There it goes, soaring into history. He's done it. He has done it. 62. Aaron Judge is the American League single-season home run leader. The AL King. Case closed.
And finally, distressing world events and the reactive media conversation may have you feeling cynical these days. Or you may prefer what comfort can be found in a more stoic attitude. Either way, the names of those philosophical reactions date to the age of the ancient Greek philosophers, including one named Diogenes. He died in 323 BCE, and his name remains associated with the Cynics and the Stoics as well. Yet his name survives to our time mostly because legend says he walked the earth in search of an honest man.
Hey, I remember Kung Fu.
When you can take the pebble from my hand.
No, not David Carradine. We are talking about Diogenes. You may have seen him on this hunt, rendered by classical sculptors, or more likely caricatured by contemporary cartoonists. He usually has a long beard and a lamp he holds high as he peers into the murky darkness. In either guise, he has a long symbolized the endless search for truth. In our time, that search is as complicated as ever. Even the idea of truth is disputed. We say the word aloud and add air quotes, or an ironic tone, a voice, or a smirk. The term has been blithely bandied about by the likes of, for example, the so-called truthers 2 decades ago who insisted that no airplanes had crashed into any buildings on September 11th, 2001. Perhaps that is why journalists and other observers often shy away from the word truth and prefer to talk about facts.
You can't handle the truth.
There are many versions of the truth, many misuses, and many disagreements about what it even means. The idea of fact is something we feel better prepared to defend on objective grounds. Even so, we must deal with those who speak of alternative facts, as though facts too were fungible. Who can forget the day after former President Trump's swearing in, when a spokesperson used that phrase to describe his utterly false counter-narrative about the size of his inauguration crowd?
This was the largest audience to ever witness an inauguration, period.
One extreme example of alternative facts might be the speech current failing Russian President Vladimir Putin gave last week, declaring the annexation of 4 regions in Ukraine.
Мы стали сильнее, потому что мы вместе. За нами правда, а в правде сила, а значит победа. Победа будет за нами! Спасибо. Удачи.
In justifying this land grab by citing a sham referendum conducted at gunpoint, Putin added yet another egregious episode to his stream of false narratives about Ukraine. Americans need not, however, feel smug about this. Putin's straining of credulity may not have been any greater than Trump's claims in late 2020, when he insisted he had won an election by a lot, but he had in fact lost by 7 million votes. It was the most extreme case in the U.S. to date of a behavior that now has a popular name: gaslighting.
Did he say basslighting?
Honestly, who lights up a fish?
No, gaslighting. The word comes from the 1944 Hollywood movie Gaslight. Ingrid Bergman won the Academy Award playing a young opera singer who doubts her sanity because of a plot to deceive and confuse her.
It was written 2 days before she was murdered.
Where did you find that?
In this score, she must have left it here. It's written by somebody called Sergius Bauer.
Give it to me.
Gregory, are you trying to tell me I'm insane?
It's what I'm trying not to tell myself.
But that's what you think, isn't it? That's what you've been hinting and suggesting for months now, ever since...
Since what?
Since the day I lost your brooch. Yes, that's when it all began. No, it began before that. The first day here when I found that letter.
What letter?
The one I found among the music. From that man called Bauer. Sergius Bauer, yes. I remember.
Yes, you're right. That's when it began.
Yes.
I can see you still, standing there and saying, look at this letter, and staring at nothing.
What?
You had nothing in your hand.
What?
I was staggered, but I didn't know then how much reason I had to be.
I don't know. What reason?
I didn't know then about your mother.
What about my mother?
Your mother was mad.
Oh, Gregory.
She died in an asylum when you were a year old.
That's not true.
I've been making inquiries about Alice Alquist's sister. I've talked to the doctor who attended her. You'd like to see him?
No.
He described her symptoms to me. Do you like to hear them? It began with her imagining things, that she heard noises, footsteps, voices. And then the voices began to speak to her. And in the end, she died in an asylum with no brain at all.
No, please. Oh, no.
Ooh, great scene.
That's why Bergman won the Oscar.
Absolutely. Yet today, its one-word title has entered the language as a code word for elaborate lying, or treating fictional scenarios as real. It is now common to see it in headlines or hear it on cable TV news. It is surely more familiar to most Americans than the lamp of Diogenes. In our time, it can be argued that the burden long borne by the word truth has shifted to the word fact.
Just the facts, ma'am.
If truth has come to be regarded as subjective, the realm of the personal, we still see reasonable people of widely disparate backgrounds recognizing facts for what they are.
We are talking about actual facts here, yes?
As opposed to alternative facts?
Yes. They are the building blocks of demonstrable reality. They are beyond denial, beyond the debate on competing cable TV news channels. By these lights, if we had Diogenes in our day, he might very well be called a fact checker. There are 2 famous quotations often cited by political figures and journalists in the defense of facts. One is from John Adams, the future president who had the challenging task of defending the British soldiers who fired on a rowdy crowd in 1770, an incident known as the Boston Massacre. Adams understood why jurors were inclined to convict the Redcoats, but argued the facts were more complex, and that meant they had to think again.
Facts are stubborn things. See, whatever our wishes, our inclinations, or the dictums of our passions, they cannot alter the state of facts and evidence.
The four-term senator from New York, Daniel Patrick Moynihan, said it in fewer words. Everyone is entitled to their own opinion, but not to their own facts. As long as we can make that distinction, we can aspire to shutting off the gaslight and looking to the lamp of Diogenes.
Which is cheaper, the lamp or gaslight?
I'm not sure with the current state of inflation.
It's been 637 days since the January 6th attack on the Capitol and our democracy, and failed former President Trump has still not been indicted or charged with anything. This has been But Frankly Pierce News. Thanks for watching. I'm Arthur Fairview. Left and rights of passage, black and whites of youth. Who can face the knowledge that the truth is not the truth? Obsolete? Absolute.
And